Next up, we have Everette Sizemore. He works for Inflow, where he is the Director of R&D and Special Projects, which to me sounds like a great laugh. That sounds like the kind of job I would like to have. He's going to be speaking at SMX Milan in November, and he bridges the gap between technical marketing and traditional marketing. And what we're going to see from him is personas and persona building. So will you please welcome to the stage Everette Sizemore.
So I can gauge how much to spend on the first half of this topic. So raise your hands, please, if you have done audience personas. All right, about a quarter of the room. Those of you who have may have heard some of these reasons for clients or your boss not wanting to do them. And some of you who haven't may not have done them for these reasons. The first one is we already know who our audience is. We've been in business for 30 years. You can't tell me anything I don't know about my audience. And the other is they're not useful for the type of marketing we do. We sell t-shirts. Everybody wears t-shirts, so our audience is everybody. And then of course, they're too expensive and they take too long to develop. Time is money, and you can't spend either one of them for too long without an ROI. I'm going to talk about the why to do audience personas for a little while, and then we'll get into the how to do them, on a budget, by the way. So why to do audience personas? Well, first of all, here are some use cases. In this use case, we have Auto Body Tool Mart, which is, I work for a company called Inflow. We're based in Denver, Colorado, and this is one of our clients. And they've been in business for over 30 years. Their segments are what you might think of in a brainstorming session. You have people who sell cars, people who fix cars, do-it-yourselfers, who, aftermarket gearheads, those types of folks. And after 30 years, they still had not discovered this segment, which we discovered when doing the audience persona research. And according to the North American Council of Automotive Teachers, there are thousands of these folks across the country with collectively millions of dollars in budget. Similarly, we had a client who sells parks and recreation equipment. And when doing the research for the personas for this client, we uncovered a segment that they have called golf course superintendents. And these people were buying off the site already, but they weren't being marketed to, and that's why I say an existing segment that was hidden. They have a navigation menu on their website that says sports complexes, and under it you'll see football and baseball and soccer, but nothing about golf. So according to the Golf Course Superintendents Association of America, these are the people who are spending the budget to buy parks and recreation equipment for golf courses. And you can see how this might be valuable. Maybe we could go to Facebook, target all the Golf Course Superintendents of America followers on Facebook with a piece of content that says how to get the most out of your 2016 groundskeeping budget. Get them to the site, set a cookie. Now we can retarget and show them ads for outdoor trash cans or benches or the types of things that these folks are buying. Unbelvi is another client of ours. They sell high-end urns, and this guy, Caleb Wild, is somewhat of a celebrity amongst funeral directors. There's a Caleb Wild for every industry, right? And my wife doesn't know who Rand Fishkin is. That's fine. Well, actually, she does now. She tells me how cute he is all the time. And so Caleb Wild is somewhat of a celebrity among that segment. And of course, funeral directors is a great segment for people who sell high-end urns, at least people who sell them business to business. So some things that we could do with this knowledge, we could get Caleb we could hire him to write an article on Une Bellevie's website about how to market your funeral home business on social media in a respectful way. And then that would allow us to leverage his social influence to get our clients' potential customers over to their website and introduce them to their brand. The Cremation Association of North America was a great resource for information about that segment. But the reason I put up this slide is because when I was doing the audience persona research, the president of CANA said, well, that sounds great, it's very interesting. We put out a newsletter to funeral directors and morticians, like 20,000 of them every month, and we'd love to do a case study about your client, Une Bellevie. So again, another opportunity to get them in front of their audience segment. They also have a monthly print magazine, Cremationist, and so it wouldn't be hard to write an article. There is. So it wouldn't be difficult to write an article for them. Maybe we could hire an expert writer like Caleb Wild, or maybe we just write it ourselves. It could be trends in urn design. Speaking of, I doubt they sell very many of these, but it makes great link bait. Another thing audience personas are good for is to find expert writers. So a lot of B2B companies who are in highly technical fields don't want to hire some college graduate who thinks he's Jack Kerouac or Hunter Thompson to write an article for them for 20 bucks. And that's because the people who read their website or read their publications have a lot more knowledge than this. For instance, meet Fred. We have a client who does security systems and like keyless door locks and things like that. And one of their segments are facilities directors. These people have a lot of knowledge in their head. It takes a long time to get to a facilities director level. You know, this guy deals with everything from the carpet to the security system to, you know, on-premises events and everything in between. And he's been doing it for a very long time. So we couldn't exactly hire some general copywriter to write content for him because he wouldn't like it. He would sniff it out right away. And through the audience persona research process, we discovered, you know, these folks. Michael, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, Thero, wrote for Forbes, or has published articles in Forbes. Leah Grout-Garris does ghostwriting, which all of you are probably familiar with that. It means that we can have her write for our client and then put our client's name on it. Last but not least, audience personas are great for getting an in-depth understanding of what type of content to produce. What do you publish? What do you write about? Where do you promote it? What is it that these people are looking for? What problems are you trying to solve for them? And all of these are going to be linked to at the end, so don't worry if you don't get time to copy down a link for any of the resources I show. The last slide will have them all, and this is also up on SlideShare. We get all this information through our audience persona research process, and part of the problem is organizing it in a useful way. And if you go to Google and you type content gap analysis tool, content gap analysis template, you'll find a bunch of things like this. I created this one because the other ones didn't really do what I wanted them to do, which is I want to be able to look at it and just at a glance, I can see that there's a huge gap for early buying stage content for this guy, Style Focus Samuel. And this is the type of content that drives demand. You're driving content into the top of the funnel. And some of the content that Ian was talking about earlier, where, you know, the weird and that kind of stuff, where you're taking disparate ideas that maybe don't necessarily have to do exactly with your client's products or services, but you're tying in with something else that's of interest to those people. That's the type of stuff that drives demand, because it doesn't matter how well you rank on Google if nobody is searching for it, right? So we're done with the how, or I'm sorry, we're done with the why, and we're going to get on to the how and the where. How do you do audience personas? Where do you get your information from without spinning an arm and a leg? Some of these brands probably look familiar to you. They're expensive. And I don't know about you, but most of my clients can't afford to buy custom segmented data from Gallup or Gartner or Nielsen. So we tend to go with the free tools like, we started off doing audience persona research with Google Analytics and QuantCast data. The problem with that is it's not always useful. It's not always actionable. And an example is, you've probably seen this before, where you're comparing two different Google Analytics interest and demographics reports, and it's like virtually the same, right? Who doesn't like arts and entertainment? What does that tell me about how I can market to you? Very little. But there are ways to get free, or at least cheap, actionable data from your audience personas that doesn't take a long time, and I'd like to discuss some of those. But first, I want to go over 3 tips for speeding up and lowering the cost of your audience persona research. First of all, audience personas can be as expensive as you want them to be. You can get focus groups, the F word. You can spend an arm and a leg on custom data from these other like Gartner and Nielsen type sites. We like to look at it as an iterative process. It's ongoing, right? So don't try to get them perfect your first time. And what you really want to do is avoid getting caught down some rabbit hole where you're just spending hours and hours or days trying to find information to fill in this audience persona template that you downloaded from the web. Oh my God, I got to know how many kids they have. If I don't, then I can't use these personas. So one thing you can do is figure out ahead of time what it is you're trying to find out. Only ask the questions that you've deemed important ahead of time. If you want to know how many kids somebody has, or what their income is, or what their gender is, great. A lot of that information is easy to find. But if there's something that you're trying to find and you don't have something actionable that you want to do with that bit of information, then I would argue that you probably shouldn't waste too much time trying to find it. Focus instead on the things that you think are important. Things like, where should I publish? What should I publish? Who are their influencers? Those are the important things. And here's what I'd like to spend the rest of the time talking about. Don't reinvent the wheel, because a lot of people have already spent thousands, sometimes millions, doing the research that you're doing, and you'll be surprised at what you can get just by asking for it. Any Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans? All right. I had to put a couple in there. So we're about halfway through, and this slide is important to me because when I first started doing audience personas, and when I started teaching our strategists at Inflow how to do them, it quickly became apparent that the amount and variety of data is almost overwhelming, and you get this paralysis, and you don't even know where to start. So the rest of the slides here are going to talk about where to start and help you through that. But first, here are 4 types of sources for easy, often free, segmented data. True Style Doors is another client of ours. They sell custom doors, and this slide is about nonprofits, industry trade groups, associations that are specific to an industry. These places are great if you know a job title, which is often the case in B2B, right? So the American Society of Interior Designers is obviously a good place to start if one of your segments is interior designers, right? So I went to Google and said, okay, show me all of the results that are PDF files with the word industry and/or report from the American Society of Interior Designers. And nothing. So I did the next logical thing, and I picked up the phone and called them. So don't be afraid to pick up the phone. A lot of these trade groups are old school. And here's, there's a reason I couldn't find it online. They charge $40 for it. They don't want you to get it for free. So I told them I was writing an article about the interior design industry, which is true, because that's what we do with content marketing. And she sent it over, and here's some of what was in it. We've got gender, age, income level, all pretty good foundational things if you're doing audience persona work, right? And this tells me, this was in the same report, and this tells me that among the interior designers who are part of this organization, which ostensibly is most interior designers in America, They're about halfway through their career and they're college graduates, so they're not spring chickens. Maybe we need to hire an expert author. This tells me where to spend my PPC budget. It tells me which state level organizations, so there's an ASID, Association of Interior Designers at the state level too. And it tells me which ones maybe I should talk to about content distribution deals. Maybe I can write an article and put it on their blog or in their newsletter. And then of course, True Style, because they sell custom doors, was happy to know this information. 59% of the interior designers, at least who are part of this organization, are in the market for doors. But what if you're not B2B? What if you're a retail business and instead of having a job title or a job function or even an industry in common, they have an interest? When people have interests in common, then there's probably a magazine for it. There's almost always a magazine for it. And if there's a magazine for it, there's probably a media kit. And if there's a media kit, there's probably an editorial calendar. And there's probably a bunch of statistics about their readership. So let's say you run or you do marketing for an online pet store. A good place to start would be to Google pet magazine advertise. And if that doesn't get you what you need, you could try some other searches. Pet magazine advertise file type PDF, and this is going to give me all the PDF stuff, which media kits tend to be in that format, right? You see the Oklahoma City pet magazine, but we're going to go with the really old result at the top from 2009. And when I downloaded the PDF file, this was one of the pages in it, and now my audience persona research, at least the demographics part of the research, is done for me. Assuming that we have a similar audience, which most of the time you're going to, you can also talk to customer service, the sales team. Of course, it's good to talk to the marketing department and the CEO, but really you want to end up on the phone with whoever's talking to the customer, because all these these media kits and the advertising kits and all the data you can get from the organizations will have the demographic stuff you need, but when it comes to feelings and emotions and what their pain points are and what their goals and obstacles are, you need to talk to the people who are on the phone answering complaints. At the end of this presentation, I have a link to a questionnaire. I don't know what's going on with my accent today, but and it'll get you started. It has all the questions that we ask our clients. When we get on the phone with them, it's a half-an-hour interview, and it'll get you 80% of the way to your audience personas. There are lots of other great resources out there, some of them free, some of them cheap, some of them you got to pay for. BLS.gov is great if you want to get salary ranges. Facebook Insights and other native ad platforms are good, but you have to be careful with them because they skew the data towards the people who are likely to use those platforms, which may or may not be your audience segment. And if you know of more, please tweet them to me or email them to me. I'm collecting them. So with that, I think we're going to have a little bit of time for Q&A, but thank you, first of all. I would like to talk about some of these resources since I have a couple of minutes here. There's a SlideShare version of the deck, so don't worry about scribbling down links. If you go and scribble down one link, it'll be that top Google link. There's an audience persona research template. That's a big Excel file, and what that is I created it as a repository for all the stuff I learned when researching a persona, because you're going to go from this source to that source and you're going to learn all kinds of stuff, and before you can really craft a persona, you've got a bunch of information and you need to put it somewhere, and so that's what that is for. We have the Persona Discovery Call Agenda, which I just spoke about. It has some really good questions to ask the client. You can customize it. And the Persona Topic Matrix, which was that funny looking document with the big squares with the X's in them. And then, of course, some great content. The guy who's going to be talking to you tomorrow morning, Mike King, is, if you ever have a question about audience personas, he's definitely the guy to ask. He knows way more about this stuff than I do. I know how to hack it together and do it on a budget. And that's because it's just born out of necessity. Our clients didn't have $30,000 to drop on audience personas, as I'm guessing a lot of yours don't either. But he's done some full-scale ones for some larger clients, and he can tell you about some more expensive data options, but they're far better than some of the free ones out there. Maybe we have some time for questions?
Thank you, Everett.
Thank you. Thank you. 1944.
Thank you.
You can give it to the next person.
I will do, yeah. So I have a couple of questions for you. I really like how this is playing into what Dan Lovejoy was saying about empathy.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, how does somebody whose job is not thinking like a writer or a playwright, trying to get inside the heads of other people every day, how do they find time and space in their brain to sit back and write about Bob, who's, runs a facility for a hospital? That's kind of a different headspace.
Are you talking about the marketer or the writer?
The marketer.
The marketer, okay. So the marketer, you're working with data. You will hire a writer to write that. You will basically, you want to tell them what to write about, but leave all the getting into the space to them. You'll have the data at your back so you know what to write about. That's based on keyword research. It's based on the editorial calendar stuff.
Right.
It's based on the interview with the client or your boss or the customer service team. You could go to Google and start typing something and see what Google Suggest says. There are all kinds of ways to come up with content ideas to write about, including that content gap analysis tool.
So at sort of the base of my question, I think what I'm asking is, some people build personas with a little bit of data and a lot of sort of, well, we know who our customers are, it's these kind of people, and the data can verify that. And some people really go for the data, and they say, well, these must be our customers because the data says it's our customers.
Yeah.
And where do you fall? And when somebody says, that doesn't look like one of our customers, what do you say, and how do you play those?
Well, I would say good. Now you have an opportunity to go after a new segment. But I think there's a balance between being totally data-driven with your persona research and being totally, I'm going with my gut, here's what I think, and because you are not the user, right?
Yeah.
So what I would say is try not to go too much on intuition. The difference between audience personas for old school marketing, which is still very important, right? Maybe I shouldn't call it old school, but traditional marketing, right? Still really important. And audience personas for digital marketing or inbound marketing is that when I'm doing these, I don't spend a lot of time on the story. I don't spend a lot of time crafting this. Yeah.
Bob loves to
he
go
takes
skiing.
his kid fishing on Saturdays,
right.
Because it's not, only if it's relevant do I do that. I'm more concerned with what type of content does this person need at each stage in their buying cycle? And where do I publish that content to get it in front of them if they're not coming to our website? And who influences them? How do I get those influencers on board with producing this content, or at least contributing to this content so that we can leverage their social influence? Things like that are more important to me, I think, than the backstory.
Okay, and I have another question for you. Once you've got this data, okay, who needs to be looking at it, referencing it? Who do you think needs to see the personas?
Well, first of all, the marketer needs to continue looking at it. After every campaign, it will get better. You'll find out, I was wrong about this, let me change it. Now and that storyline can get better as well. Writers need it. Anyone who's doing creative work needs it, whether that is like a call to action or a banner ad, anything like that. I think the merchandising department should probably have it if it's an e-commerce company. The sales department should have it if it's a B2B company. Of course, all the executive team should have a look at it. So everybody.
So we built 3 personas for Confluence before we put this year's conference on. And we found that about 98% of the audience fall into one of these 3 groups. They are a business owner who wears many hats and is kind of overwhelmed by digital marketing, but needs to learn more. a marketing director, CMO, executive, who manages marketers, digital marketers, and a digital marketing specialist. Okay? I think about 98% of you. Raise your hand if you're none of these things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 5%. Okay, thank you. So it works. I'm all in on personas. Yep. So thank you very much for kind of enlightening us on this. And before you start clapping, any questions? Let's start right at the front and work our way back.
How do you decide if you have a multiple range of products? How do you decide do you need a persona for each of those products, or is it just the category in general?
Great question.
Good question.
How do you decide how many personas you need, whether you need them at a category level, product level?
We probably wouldn't do them by product level on most e-commerce sites, but we may do them at category level. And it really depends on the business. But I would start off with the taxonomy of the category. So let's say you have a site that sells fitness gear, and one of your categories is yoga and the other one is running, then obviously you have at least 2 different personas there. Then talking to the customer service department will probably reveal a few. So when you're doing audience personas, that's the first thing you need to figure out is, what are the segments? And I probably don't need to say this, but just in case, an audience persona is the personification of a segment. So in an audience persona, you don't say 25 to 30 years old, you pick an age. But a segment could be 25 to 30 years old. So if you're talking to your customer service team and you just say, who's calling you? Or you talk to your sales team, what are when people call you, how do they identify themselves? What type of person are they? And that's good brainstorming material to get started, and then you can vet that through your research. So I don't know, it's not a great answer to your question because that question really depends on the situation. Normally we wouldn't do more than 5. A lot of times we'll have what we call mini personas. So let's say you have this segment that is a school teacher, but there's a difference between a science teacher and an English teacher. So maybe there's a main persona that's school teacher, but within that we have these mini segments or mini personas for the different topics.
Scott Klosowski, who's going to speak tomorrow keynote, he uses something interesting that he shared with me, personas and then constituent groups. And there may be many personas within a constituent group, and there may be many constituent groups. So if you're a university, you may have students as a constituency, parents as a constituency, alum as a constituency, and then drill down further into those persona groups. And you just have to do it as it makes best sense for you, I think, is kind of the message. Other questions? There were some. You guys are getting shy now. Okay.
Yeah, the answer to that would be more than you can market to. And that comes down to how much time you have. So maybe the best way to answer this question is to say, if I do a marketing campaign, I'm going to choose a persona as the primary target. I'm going to choose a segment, right? And maybe there's a secondary or even a tertiary segment, but I'm focused on this one because that's the whole point of doing them. And if I can do one marketing campaign a month, then I don't want to start off with 10 personas because it'll take me a long time to do them, and it's a year later before I get them all done. So I would only do maybe 3. And that way I have time, this month I'll focus on this one, and then they overlap, right? So you launch a campaign one month and another month, but you can't market to all of them at once because then you're just watering down your efforts.
Thank you. Everette, before you go, Inflow, what kind of customers to Inflow out of Denver really looking for?
E-commerce businesses. So the internet retailer second 500 list is really our sweet spot. People who aren't so big that they can't get anything through the red tape, but they're not so small that they don't have a marketing budget. I just want to add one more thing. Before I come from a background of technical SEO, and I remember somebody from our marketing team 6 years ago saying, you should do audience personas. I was working at a company in Boulder, Colorado called Gaiam. They sell yoga stuff. And I said, why do I need that? I'll just go to Google and see what keywords they're typing and make the content. I don't need to know. And it's all changed in the last 3 or 4 years, and I can't picture doing marketing in 2015, 2016 without audience personas. I just couldn't, I can't wrap my head around doing that any longer.
So I read Ogilvy on advertising recently, which is kind of like a full core foundational book for the advertising industry. And it's amazing. I was like, whoa, we've come full circle. So that's golden age of advertising, Mad Men stuff, right? And it's talking basically about native advertising and how to make the most of it and how to do great content marketing, but through the prism of the 60s. And it's just like, wow. So what's happening is digital marketers, that marriage, it's that collision again. Is it a happy marriage? Is it a collision? Who knows? But yeah, absolutely.
But Dan Draper would have spent $50,000, $100,000 developing the personas. Is that his name? Dan?
Don.
Don? Okay, Don.
It's okay, I get to school you this time. I got schooled earlier.
I have chickens and I do eat them.
You do?
Yes.
Yeah, I felt really bad when I was, Brian, he kind of looked horrified, like nobody would eat a chicken.
No, I don't eat
People eat chickens, right?
Yeah. Well,
You're like,
yeah. So the difference is, if you do it this way, you're going to spend a couple of days on them. Whatever your salary is, that's probably what you're going to have into it, not $30,000 or $50,000.
thank you very much, Everett.
Thank you, everyone.